my life story, my journey.
Diamond painting doesn't sound like it's cheap, but it's the process, right?
Yeah.
This is something that I forget about.
Good. That'd be good.
How secure am I going to be in your leg? I am. Right here.
Sure.
Let's get started. Are you okay, DJ?
Go ahead and get started.
Oh.
With my introduction. By
Okay.
talking into
How
my
you doing?
about 10 seconds, then you can start.
All right. Go to the chiropractor today.
Isn't that what Peppa Pig does? I don't know, I've never watched it, but.
Probably. Okay. Hi, everyone. Wow, what a crowd we have here today. Yeah. I'm Cheryl Coughlin. I'm the executive director here at the Josephi Center. And we've got, here comes Steve. Come in, Steve. Come, sit for a moment. This is just, it's a surprise party for you. We are so lucky today. We have two ceramic artists here, Victoria Christen, is that correct? From Portland, and she's a professional ceramicist as well as art instructor. And I'll let her get started. And then we also have Julia Allen here, who is our ceramic art instructor, taking the summer off a little bit, but back in the fall, and has been teaching over the last year. But I'm very excited to have both of them here because ceramics is one of the big programs that we would like to increase here at the Josephi Center with our expansion. And thank all the donors that have made this happen or are making it happen. And it's just going to be a really exciting time where we'll have artists in residence as well as open studio time where people can come and do their ceramics without having to take a class and buy their own clay and work on how they want to fire their own art. And so just learning from other artists. I was listening to Julia and Victoria talk, and they were doing some serious ceramic nerd talk, like what cone do you fire that to? What kind of clay where do you get your clay? All that kind of stuff. And it's really fun to hear people talk because they have so much in common and they can appreciate each other's hard work that goes into it. But I'm excited to have Victoria here, who is now an artist in residence at LH Project, and thankful that you could be here. So Victoria, please take the mic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and I just want to publicly thank LH for being able to spend the month of June working in the studio there and living in Joseph. It's been a real wonderful experience, and thanks. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about my ceramic journey, and I grew up and like how my work develops and changed, and I'm going to show you at the end work that I worked on at LH. I grew up, first 18 years, I grew up in eastern Montana in the Badlands, and this is Makoshika Park, which was like 3 miles from where my house was right next to the grain elevator, and I would spend most of my weekends in the summer in this park called Makoshika. And it would be quite common to walk in the valleys and the coulees and find these beautiful natural sculptures of like bones and breasts, and it would just be from natural glacier movement of the clay and the sediment. Every change of the season, my mother would pack the whole family up and we would go to Makoshika and have a pancake breakfast, and then we would hike down to the sand horse, and we would carve our names in, and we'd have a picture taken. And I love looking at the way my mom looks. She's kind of like sitting on top of the breast, and I'm kind of leaning against the form that looks sort of like a penis. And I just kind of love the look that both of us have, where I'm probably 4 or 5 there. And my mom was always, she made her own clothes. She made all my clothes. And I just kind of like the photo, even it's like a mother and daughter, it seems like we're both pretty on our own course. My grandparents and my parents were antique collectors. And when my father's mother passed away, we went through her cup and saucers collection, and much to my surprise, Makoshika Park showed up on one of the cups and saucers. And Glendive, Montana is really like Nowheresville. It's like really on eastern Montana, 26 miles from the North Dakota border. So I was really shocked to see that there was a souvenir cup and saucer of Makoshika Park. The bathrobe on the left is made out of scraps of corduroy that my mother made for me when I was 9. And the ties skirt is something that I made when I was 18. I really like taking kind of cast off things or leftover things and then giving them a new life. This is kind of the way I approach working in ceramics. I throw a lot of different forms, and then I let it get leather hard, and then I cut them up. And then I paint them with a colored slip. This is like a serving dish. And I kind of like that it sort of looks like an old pair of flannel pajamas. I went to the University of Minnesota and got my MFA, and I was not interested at all in pottery. And Warren McKenzie, who is an international known potter, he was the chair and a major influence to most American potters. And I was into doing performance art and sculpture. And what I loved about clay was the material itself. So this is a performance I did where I put my professors on a pedestal, and I painted the room, and I lined the floor with tar paper because it's a great material to collect dust. And then I made a soundtrack from all my daughter's wind-up toys, and did this sort of putting on my ice skates, my high heels, my cross-country skis, and I sort of like did this action painting. And it did not go very well, except this. I didn't cry, so that was a success. But the best thing was that a sculptor professor saw how the faculty were just reacting so crazy, and he pulled me into his office and he said, "I don't know what you did in that room, Victoria, but you should never stop doing that." So then I did more performance work, and I did a workshop with Linda Montano, who had done a piece where she was tied to a man by a 6-foot rope for like 6 months, and then she just had been released, and we were doing this group performance. And I lived in the Twin Cities, and for 2 afternoons, a group of us read names out of the telephone book trying to weave together St. Paul and Minnesota, and I just was done with performance after that, because it was kind of covered in the 6 o'clock news as sort of a comedy routine. But my last performance was this old peddler's truck where I set up a tea shop in the Pearl District and served hot tea and cold tea, and had my old typewriter and a clothesline, and I asked people if they wanted a cup of tea, and they could write poetry. And then they could keep a cup. And that's about the extent now of my performance work. This is one of my first spots out of grad school, and what I loved about it is it kind of captured the gesture of how I felt when my daughter came home late from curfew, where I would be in the front porch with my hand on my hip, just ready to find out where in the hell she's been. This is Gail Kendall and I had in Sika, and Gail was my first ceramic teacher, and she continues to be my mentor in how to live my life, how to knit, and This is the type of work that she does, earthenware, highly decorative, gold luster. She's kind of known for her soup tureens. This is an early pot that functions as a tulip holder, and also you can take the vase out and it can be a like a roll holder or bread basket. But I like my pots to sort of celebrate. They serve you, but they also are kind of fun to look at. This is a creamer where you can offer someone cream from their coffee from across the table, which is kind of fun. You can also water your little plants, the nursery plants. This is a bottle to fill your iron on the ironing board if you still iron and you want a good steam. The lid here removes, and then you can pour the water out of here, fill up your iron. The more pots I made, they started to look like hats. So I was living in Minnesota at the time, and they're very generous with grants, and I wrote a grant to study with the milliner through the Guthrie Theater, Trish Carney, and I got it. So I went to her studio, and she taught me how to make patterns and how to sew from the pattern, doing a wrap pattern. And this was one of the pieces, which is purple and pink leather cozy for the teapot, lined in like blue silk. And it's functional, and it's kind of fun. This was sort of like a turning point where, as a potter, I'm always interested in the relationship to the interior space of a pot and exterior. And when I made this one, I kind of fell in love with the fact that it had an interior and it had an exterior at the same time. And for me, the piece was about creating a space that was protective but also sort of free. And how my grandma always put these crimped wire cages around her tulips that would really not stop anybody, but illusion that it had some way of marking a boundary. Then my pieces became more like crazy quilts, where they became less functional and more decorative. These are flower vases. And also I was given a lot of old commercial glazes. I hate to throw anything out, so I challenged myself to not buy any new materials, but to use what I had. And this is the work that came out of that. This I saw as a landscape of Montana with the mountains in the sky. And I kind of get carried away with multi-firings to make the surface look really lush, sort of like caramel-coated butterscotch rickrack. This is a beginning of a series of using clay shards with fabric on handmade paper. And basically, they're sort of objects that had meaning to me. Like this was what was left over of an earring my daughter gave to me that I ran over with my car. And so I gathered up the pieces, and then I thought, I can use that in this piece. This is, when my father passed away, he had this great pair of shoes that he would garden in that had one time been his dance shoes. And so I did this ritual of filling them up with clay slip every day for maybe 2 weeks, and then I fired the shoe in my gas kiln, and it had this great residue from just the salt and the sweat from his foot that sort of self-glazed it and made this really interesting surface. And so this is just a part of his shoe. And I just played around in making these constructions with his shoe. This is silk, clay-infused paper, and scraps of paper. I was doing a residency at Watershed, and I couldn't stay long because I had an emergency to come back home with, but I wanted to make something. So I used this paper and just filled it with the clay that was on the land there. This is another piece with my dad's shoe. It's like layers of silk, and I love the way you can, the fabric is transparent, a lot like glaze is. Then I've kind of stretched that and started using my parents' broken china in some of my three-dimensional constructions. This is a landscape. This is a piece that's a collection of my shards on my pieces. It's sort of like, to me, kind of felt the way that I felt during COVID, that everything was just kind of holding things together that were kind of falling apart. Then during COVID, I started working on gathering up other people's unfinished projects and trying to finish them for them. I would buy boxes of scraps, felt scraps, and then I would sew them together. And this was one piece I made, and this is another piece. They're like wall hangings, about this big. And then they found their way in making little pads for my pots to sit on. And this is it's like sitting on a blue pond. Here's another assemblage of a hand-painted china plate that I got at the Goodwill, and it was really beautiful, so I just made a rack that it could sit in. These are more kind of found objects reconsidered, where I found this hand-tied doily that had been displayed in this velvet and glass on top, and it made this beautiful kind of impression on it. Okay, keep going. This is a large piece that's a half unfinished quilt in a basket, that it just sort of captured the way I feel about handmade, what's traditional women's work, and incorporating it all together. This is a soda fire piece that incorporates the image of a braid on top and the impression on the bottom. And I like the soda kiln works sort of like a eraser. It will, if it hits the pot in a certain way, it will erase the marks and make interesting kind of impressions. The next group of slides are direct examples of things that have inspired me. I've never sit out and say, oh, I'm going to do something exactly to represent this, but after I've done it, 3 or 4 years pass, and then I'll realize, oh, that's what I was doing. I never really follow a direct path in my work, but this is kind of a grouping of simple white porcelain with drawings with cobalt. And I took a long train trip in the wintertime to North Dakota and Montana, and this is sort of like symbolic of this, which is the dish pantry. My aunt had this picture in the nursing home room, and I asked her what it was, and she said, well, that's the dish pantry. And my grandparents were homesteaders, and they were like dirt farmers in eastern Montana. And after the dishes were done, they would water the one tree that they had, and this was the dish pantry. And this is all that's now at the homestead. This is the bottom of their home. It's just kind of shocking to go back there. This is like on my walk with Rudy when it's in the fall and the rain starts. And then the decomposing leaves on the sidewalk. That's what I was trying to capture with my soda kiln and tile. This is the most recent. My friend Cynthia was working on a quilt, and I was working on making some really large coil pots, and she worked months and months on this cross design, and I was trying to figure out how I should finish designing this pot. And then I thought, well, why don't I play around with underglaze transfers and use the same motif that Cynthia's using on her quilt. And so this is entitled For Cynthia. This is like the view from my dining room. This is like the rug that my mom made. She made all our rugs by ripping out old clothes and putting together and braiding them. This is my father's barbed wire collection. This is Rudy's bed, and it's made out of old shirts that his previous owner had. I made a slip cover for his bed. Just kind of give you a sense. Then I decided to try to do something kind of in honor of my mother, and I remember her making all of our rugs, and so I thought I will make a really big rug that I can hang on the wall. And I really learned a lot, that it's not as easy as it seems. Then I tried to find a home for it, and sometimes you save for your kids and you think they will want them, and you're just like, my daughter wanted it, but she wanted it a certain size. And I wanted it to be huge. And then I figured I won't go as large as I want to because I wanted to have a home to go to. Then I did a series of watercolors with silhouettes of traditional vessel forms and deconstructing the braid. And then this is how I did the braid on a large pinch pot. I also have been hoarding cutout shapes of wool felt for the last 30 years, and they were stored in a chest, and I decided either get rid of them or use them. So I sewed them together into different shapes, and I really kind of love the way the shapes kind of work together. But I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do with them. I made a wool quilt. There's a Pendleton outlet store not that far from my house, and I found this beautiful gray wool, and so this is a horrible photo I took, but anyway, this is a blanket that I'm going to have in an exhibition. And then I tried to focus on these shapes while I spent the month here in Joseph, and they are morphing into landscapes, my shapes. This seems very much like a mountainscape to me. It hasn't even been finished yet. There's a watercolor of the shapes, and then they become three-dimensional. And that's kind of my journey so far. So thank you for your attention.
Couple questions though.
Okay.
So, she mentioned NSECA. She mentioned NSECA. I am wanting to go to NSECA, so tell them what that's all about.
NSECA is a national educational organization for the ceramic arts. And it is once a year a conference, and people from now all over the world come, and there's exhibitions, there's discussion groups, there's panels, there's, I don't know, Brett, attendance is probably 6,000. Every year it's in a different city.
It'll be in Salt Lake City next year.
Yes.
Anybody want a road trip?
Oh, it's so wonderful. When I was in undergrad, I went every year. When I was in grad school, I went every year. And it's just, there's work. Brett was on the board. Can you explain more about?
There's demonstrations. You listed most of it, but there's demonstrations. There's some hands-on things.
There's also a commercial booth where you can buy every ceramic tool, every underglaze, every book. You can spend the entire afternoon going from booth to booth. And then you will make friends that you will last a lifetime. I met my friend Ada Nsika, who became my best friend when I moved to Portland. We were looking at houses, and we went down to Bullseye, and there Ted was. And I met him. Ted Vogel. So it's crazy. It's a small world. I encourage you to do a road trip. It's not that far to Salt Lake. Yeah. And also another great place that has workshops is the Archie Bray Foundation. Yeah, that's in Helena. Any other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I don't need that.
Turn some lights on for you, Julia.
Hi, friends. Looking around, it's nice to see faces. I sat down to do a presentation, and in my 9-to-5 job, I do a fair amount of them, and I literally couldn't do it. And I thought, why is that? And that is because in my ceramic art, I rarely think ahead with anything. And it's not about PowerPoints for me, or even trying to put that even into a frame of mind. So I was born and raised here, went to Southern Oregon State College back then, Ashland, Oregon, and took an art history class. And I dropped that within 2 weeks because I thought, there is no way I'm making it through this class. And someone said, why don't you take pottery? Because, you can take it pass, no pass. And I figured if I take it and show up, pass, no pass, at least I'm sure he'll give me a passing grade, right? Well, 2 years I spent there getting my prerequisites for nursing, and they could always find me in the ceramics studio because the art teacher would let me, he says, just lock up when you're done. So I spent a lot of time down there and enjoyed it very much. But unfortunately, Southern Oregon State College was revamping their nursing program, so I had to leave. So got my nursing degree, got married, had kids. Then my husband made the mistake of saying, what do you want for your birthday? So I went and took a pottery class with one-on-one with a guy in La Grande that does raku. And that's what my first pottery instructor was known for. Little did I know, he was world-renowned raku artist that I got to learn from. So I took that class, had a great time. My oldest sister says, you need a hobby. So she bought me my first wheel. And then my neighbor was an electrician, and he loved to go to auction. And he found me a kiln for $300, which I still use. That's my Bisfire kiln. And he wired it up for me. And so in my garage, my husband had half the garage to do his bike repair work, and I had the other part to do my pottery. So I did that as a side hobby for quite a few years. But I was taking a class at the Pottery Center in Boise. And my third class, they said, you can't come back anymore. I was so sad because I was making too much. It wasn't financially advantageous to have me in their class. So I enjoyed doing it very much at home. And then after 30 years, COVID hit. And I said to my husband, can I please go home? So arrived here and set up my studio in we had this ridiculously large house, and it wasn't because the house is what we wanted. We wanted the 3 garages. One for my husband's bike shop, one for my pottery, and then there's one for the RV spot. So here we are. Have great neighbors that come by, say hello all the time. And then another gal in town decided she no longer wanted to do pottery, so I bought out her studio. And along with that studio came 42 buckets of glazes. 42 buckets of glazes. And anyone that's anywhere from what size are the small? 1 gallon to the 5 gallon. In fact, this is latte that came from that. And anyone here know Gary Wishart? There were many of his glazes that came from there, and I even have a rib that he made from a credit card that has his name on it. But in high school, I didn't take any art classes. My family were farmers, and that was not valued to them. So, but when I came back from Southern Oregon State, I sold all my pieces. My mother was the nurse anesthetist here for, 25, 30 years. But I sold all my pieces at the hospital before she ever saw any of it. And people were coming to her saying, I had no idea that your daughter was such a great botter. She was like, what do you mean? So anyway, so when I showed up here, Wallowa County has a great little barter system, right? If you kind of do this for me, maybe I could do that for you. So I started teaching classes to this little youngster, and he takes classes here too. And they were looking for a pottery instructor, and I guess my name was dropped, so here I am. So I have a bachelor's degree, but it's not in art. It's in nursing. And I like to explore a lot. And I brought, for me, there are a lot of things I love to do. Okay, mushroom hunting, right? Who doesn't love our morels? So, you'll see it in things. I'm always looking for morel things. And I use a lot of different, whatever I can find. I'm not, I wouldn't call myself artistic. In fact, when I was little, I had this little friend, Mary, and she go over to her house, and we were doing coloring books. And I remember this very clearly. She looked at her mom, and she says, can Julie not color in my coloring books? Because she can't color inside the lines. And I think for many years, that really hit me. Be careful what you say to your kids, right? That really hit me to be, I can't draw. No way can I draw. So I think there's an artist in all of us. And it's just a matter of how you can express that. So I don't draw. I still don't draw. Sometimes I try with watercolors or something. But there are a lot of incredible artists that do other things that you can utilize for your pottery. One of them I really want to take is the print shop here. I hear they do carving in the linoleum, right?
Yeah, yes.
I was like, dang, perfect. Because I'm starting to get more into carving and how great that is. Now we have someone back here that does incredible carving, but in wood. Now, here's pieces that I have, right? Carvings in wood. So I'm getting a little bolder in thinking that I can do things. Just, you got to start from somewhere.
What do you use for acoustics? What do you use that for?
So I will share that part. So I love flowers, and my favorite flower place is Buckhorn. Have you been to Buckhorn when it's a lookout? It's out past Zumwalt, and you look out there, and the flowers are just amazing. So many times when I'm doing something with flowers or florals, I'm always thinking of Buckhorn or Zumwalt. So.
Did you engrave that?
No. But I'd sure like to. That's my next thing. You'll see me in print class, and I have 2 more years before I can do things full time, but I'll sneak them in. So what I do, I utilize this to do hand building for mugs. And because when they're on here, then you are able to press against it for carving. But when I am at the market, I sell things at the Saturday market, I can do hand building at the market, so it holds the shape. So once you have your slab, you wrap the slab around it, and then, right, Jenny? Huh? I did purchase it. And I saw a cartoon the other day where it has this gal, and she says, I scrimp on things like for life, and you have her in the grocery shop, and she's looking at her coupons and her clothes, or she's at Goodwill, but then she says, but then I go to pottery, and she's got her feathers on, and she's got her, she says, dropping all the money for the pottery, and that's me. I think That's where most of my money goes. So, growing up on a farm, we had pigs, and I came across this one gal that does cutouts. And so I cut it out, and I thought, and before you know it, a flying pig took course. So this one is actually one of my favorites. But my husband thinks the eyes look like the pig's gotten into something he shouldn't. So
You don't think you're artistic?
no, I don't. I still kind of don't, but I think
Okay.
imagination. Imagination. I do. And I do love to, a lot of times when I'm out in my pottery studio, I'll have music on, but most of the time it's very, I like to be there quiet, and who knows what's going to come to my mind. So I do use a lot of different ways to create my things. I used to be solely a wheel thrower, and snubbed my nose a little bit at having to do hand building, because I thought, that's just, but the hand building is where you can really, really explore your imagination, I think. Yeah. And I like things to be functional. And so I think that's the thing with my pig. I was like, how can I make it functional? Oh, put a hole in the bottom and some slots in the top. So this one's going to be Raku. Who doesn't like playing with fire, right? That's the great thing about Raku. This is Raku also. But what I wanted to talk about are failures, and how failure sometimes you can think about that stopping you from doing what you're, moving forward. So I brought these 3 little pieces here, and this is this is from 2009, so a little while ago, and we were talking about what do you cone fire to. When you do the first firing, which is called bisque fire, you fire to a lower temperature. And that kind of sets it so you can glaze better and that. And then the second firing is your glaze firing, and it goes to a hotter temperature. So the first one's called I go to 04 or 05, which is about 1900 degrees. Then the second one is a 6, no O in front of it. And that's 2130, somewhere around there. So when I first started, I didn't have some place to go. Well, I was taking classes, but they didn't really do great instruction. So here's the funny part. I think these are pretty cute. They turned out pretty good. I was bisque firing, the first firing, to cone 6. And then I was glazing and firing to 6 again. And my husband would come out when I'm glazing. He's like, oh, how's your glazing going? I hate it. I hate it. I hate glazing. I hate glazing. The reason why is because if there's not the porousness on it of a lower fire, then the glaze it doesn't stick as well. And it peels off, and it's just a real pain in the rear end. So I didn't even realize this was a failure until about a few years ago when I realized you're not supposed to fire both at cone 6. So
I'm surprised the glaze would even stick.
this is also one of my failures. Okay, now here's a failure. I'm going to hand this to you. Yeah, put that down. Yeah, it's pretty heavy. That's when my husband gets out of line. It's really heavy. Yeah, it's really heavy. All right. I'm going to hand this off to you just for a second. I'm going to tell you, and then so that way it can be on. I switched to a new clay, and it was cracking on the bottom. But I have a hard time throwing things away. So I was thinking, what am I going to do with this? Once again, you try to make positive out of your failures.
Oh.
Crack in the bottom. But water will go through, right?
Perfect.
Okay.
Planter.
All right.
So these are bisque fired, which means they need to go through glaze firing. So when you when you load your kiln and you have glazed pieces end up touching each other, what happens? They stick. So this is going to be a planter. I'm gonna utilize some glazes that are almost done, and like I don't have much for, and it'll be a planter. In fact, I had a planter last year at the market. It was beautiful. Had mountains across the top, beautiful piece, but cracked on the bottom. And I had some plants in it, and someone said, "Can I buy that?" And I'm not sure, but I have to tell you, there's a crack in the bottom, and that one sold for $85, right? But it was functional, so you can always take things and what may be discarded and make it functional. I bought some. You talked about transfers, but I bet you hers weren't bought transfers. So, utilizing other people's art, So because there'd be I don't want to say no way, but this would be out of my ability to draw this, but I sure liked it. But you can, the things that they're making now are incredible, so you can use your artistic talent for, and I don't even have to color inside the lines. Or, they have so many cutters now with the 3D printers, and then you find some kind of texture, and how cute is that, right? And I think, too, one of the things I want to bring up is local people help me with the, Susan Pest, yes, she is from Hungary. She has a sister there that does, she would hate me for this, please don't tell her this, that I'm going to butcher this, but she has a sister that does, it's bobbin tatting, but I don't know if it's called that. So I felt so guilty buying this because it's supposed to be, for the tree ornament. And she says, "Oh, that's going to be so nice on your tree." And I said, "I hate to tell you what I'm going to do with it. It's going to get dirty in clay." So I use, imprints. Yeah. So if you have heirloom pieces, people don't think about their doilies anymore, right? Grab some doilies from Grandma, and now Grandma's stuff lives on forever, right? Or this, I'm not sure I would have come up on my own, but they have great little cutouts you can use.
Yeah. So how did you use that for that?
So once you cut it out, then the edges come up and you attach them here.
So did it come with directions?
Where do I get my inspiration? I have told myself so many times that I'm going to get rid of Facebook and Instagram because being on social media all the time cannot be good for you. But for a while before I was getting so deep into pottery, I said, I'm going to keep it so I can see family members and friends. Now, I can't get rid of it because there's so many people sharing nowadays ways that you can do things. And that becomes sometimes a little ethical dilemma for people because if you share, someone's going to steal your idea, right? Well, I can pretty much guarantee you there's not 2 of these in the world because I tried to make one exactly the same and I don't even have 2 of them the same. So unless you're a big-time production potter that's able to reproduce it over and over and over again. We have when someone said Ted, you said Ted, and someone said Ted Juvie, that's our local celebrity for, yes. Yeah, so even when you look at his pieces, yeah. And so the OK Theater turned 100 2 years ago, I think it was, and he made mugs for the OK Theater. And I bought one for $100. I think they were spendy, but it was a good thing, right? So I take it home, and it's got a little wobble on the bottom. It's my favorite mug. I love that mug. Because, once again, it's a reminder that even the best, even the ones that we think are just perfect, they're not perfect. I bought a very expensive vase one time, took it home, put it on my wheel. It's off center. So you never, don't, I guess my inspiration most of the time comes from my failures, and you learn, and I'm very grateful for everybody that shares their failures, because the pottery community online is incredibly generous with sharing their ideas, what works, what doesn't work. I don't know of any other that does that. Let's see what other. So when I go to the market, most of the time I bring something so I can do hand building. So that's, this is for a travel mug. The Pottery Studio has an extruder. This is made from an extruder. Both pieces.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was told the talk today was about inspiration, and my inspiration, I just say, I saw the leaves that you saw in the fall. My neighbor has rhubarb bushes. Those make the most incredible bowls. Certain rocks that have imprints on it. If you find a fossil, wouldn't that be cool? Ooh, using a fossil for texture. So I encourage you to get out there and try and make something ugly, but fun. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When is your first class?
When is my first class? So I have done some 2-day classes where they come build a mug, and then I just finished 2 8-week classes. Actually, I've done 4 8-week classes. So my first 2 were hand building, and this last one was wheel throwing, and hand building. So they just finished, so I don't have any on the books now.
Will you be teaching here at the summer?
Yep. Yes, and I have in the fall probably. Yeah, I had Jenny's one of my students back there, and where else do I get my inspiration from is the students that have come through. They have made some incredible things. Incredible. We have people that are truly artists that do sgraffito. Sgraffito is where you carve in it, and then you put the glaze over the top of it. You put an underglaze over it. And then there's mishima, I think that's how you spell it, where you put wax on it, and then you carve it. There's one gal that does the most incredible art that way. And then I have people like Jenny says, I'd really like to make blank. So I researched how to do that. Someone said they wanted to make a boot, a cowboy boot. Oh my word, how am I gonna teach that? So and that gal's stuff came out just incredible. And when she was putting this white glaze that bubbles on that, I thought, that's gonna be uglier than snot. But it came out the coolest thing. So I think teaching has actually really encouraged my advancement in my own skill. Having to teach something really makes you look at your process and making sure, because what I want my students to have when they leave is something to go home with. So I may not have prepared for this except to grab a few things to bring, but for my classes, I make sure that I think about how I'm going to teach it and what can they go home with. Yeah. And that made wheel throwing much harder than hand building. Yeah. So any other questions?
Especially in 8 weeks. It was probably like an afternoon or a night.
It was 2 hours. Well, it was 2 hours and however many, 2.5, 3, whatever, whenever we finished. Yeah.
And I think everybody, it's kind of, they all sit around, everyone sits around a table, like you've seen in our studio, and people just chat and get to know each other. And so one of the special parts that I think Julia added to it is just kind of conducting this bond that people have created over time taking the class with you. So I really appreciate that.
Julia is 5-star all day long.
Oh, and I think that, we look forward to you coming back when you take your break, summer travels.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you both.
Oh, thank
And
you. It
I'm
was
so
so
glad
fun.
you both got to meet, and
It was fun.
Stanlin's taken some classes too.
In the past.
And, yeah, yeah. So.
Well, it's going to be so nice when you have the new studio and you have open up.